Howdy, folks. Welcome back to A Beginner's Guide to Public Speaking with me, Jack McCurdy, and my co-host, Peter Chittum. Hey, Peter.
Hey Jack, we're back. I thought we were done.
I thought we were done too, but we're back for a bonus episode. It wasn't until after we wrapped up doing everything, and a week later we were going through the content that we had. And the one thing that we had neglected to talk about, which is obviously all the rage at the moment, is AI. And where should you and should you not use AI in preparing to be a public speaker or whatever it is that we're doing, which I think is a pretty important topic to talk about, right? Where should
Yeah,
and shouldn't you use it?
yeah, absolutely. I think, it is a really powerful and useful tool. Like we shouldn't ignore, you should use every tool at your disposal, but it's also a tool that we're still learning how to use it, what it means, what it's going to actually mean to our jobs in the future. So I agree. Like this is a great topic to just spend a little time on just by itself and try and address this since it's not yet become normal, I think. Although it's getting there, it's not yet become normal for us to think of AI, at least for everybody, as a tool for doing something like creating a presentation or, any kind of public content.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that a lot of people are probably thinking, but isn't a presentation that I wrote supposed to be about me? Why would I use AI to help me do something that I am supposed to have created myself?
Is
Right?
that
I
because
think
AI already knows everything about you? Is that right?
no, I don't. I certainly hope not. But the amount I use it myself personally, it probably does. So probably more than I'd care to admit or like.
Okay, yeah, I opened up a can of worms there. Let's move on though. Yeah.
So throughout this series, we've looked at ideation, creating your presentation, presenting your presentation, feedback, all those kind of things. For you, Peter, where does AI slot most neatly into, I guess, in the sections that we've talked about?
Yeah, sure. So, I think a really key place, a few key places that I tend to use AI today. First is brainstorming. You know, the great thing about LLMs is that they have synthesized massive amounts of data from the web. And so somewhere kind of, buried in, all those different training weights of, what is a several billion parameter model, you are likely to find some information or maybe some orthogonal ideas to like what you're thinking of that might help you with the process of brainstorming for possible ideas. Once you have an idea, doing further ideation on like how to address that, getting ideas for how to structure a talk about topic X, Y, and Z. Certainly we know that LLMs don't necessarily know all the facts about something, or whether they know it or not. Sometimes, because of the nature of a probabilistic generation engine, sometimes they don't present them correctly. And so, but what they can do is give us some ideas for how to structure. Um, and then, certainly once you have something in place, let's say since we talked about the abstract process and how to
Mm.
distill that down, you may have like a really great description of your talk, but sometimes you might struggle with like reducing that down to the size of the abstract that you need. And so
I know I
getting
do.
yeah, absolutely. And so you can spend time on it yourself, and you definitely should, but getting help from something like an LLM with ideas for how to reword things, you know. And I think with all of these, this is not just like a one shot, one and done experience. This is sort of an iterative process. Don't just say, how can I reduce this sentence? Get several different ideas, because the nice thing about LLMs is they won't necessarily generate the exact same output every single time. And that can trigger in you ideas for things of how you want to word it. Now, those are how I use it. Talking, as I'm talking here, I'm also imagining there are probably great ways to do visuals, for our presentations. make sure that whichever engine you're using has the right licensing for that, so that if you go and post your presentation publicly, that you can do that legally. So I think there's some potential pitfalls to run into there. But yeah, all of those, anytime you're taking your idea and getting ideas back from an LLM and then vamping on those ideas, it's like having, a collaborator, basically.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like a kind of trusted advisor, depending on what you use it for as well. One of the interesting things is a lot of people use LLMs differently
Hmm.
in how, especially in content wise. And some of these, so I'm going to take Gemini as an example because we use Gemini here at Gearset, and that's what we do. If we talk about your abstract, for example, you need to give it some context. So say I've written this abstract for a conference talk based on this topic. I need the abstract to be engaging. I want it to encourage people to come to my session. What suggestions do you have for me to get it within this character or word count and achieve that objective? And the good thing about Gemini specifically is I use it for a few other things. And what it does, it actually gives me 3 suggestions or 3 ideations of the abstract that I've written and said, this is one that's bold and punchy. This is one that's inspiring. This is one that is informative. And it will often throw those things back at you as well. But if the LLM that you're using doesn't do that, naturally ask it for one that's more inspiring or one that's more engaging, one that's more punchy, based on what the criteria is from the conference organizer or whoever it is that has requested the abstract from you.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing I would just add to that briefly is that uh, you know, and we brainstormed a sort of list of don't do's with LLMs, and one of them we talked about was don't just take the AI output and copy and paste it in.
Yeah, don't do
Um,
that.
no, use it. So use this as your partner. So take what's in there and then use that to trigger ideas in you. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of like, oh, I liked that phrase, but what you don't want to do is have it generate, a 200 character, kind of anodyne LLM infused abstract and then paste that into your abstract. I've been hearing more and more from conference organizers where they will read an abstract and they will judge for you whether they think it's an LLM or not. And the last thing you want is for somebody to sniff that out. I think it's going to be an additional challenge to those of us who do go and speak at conferences that if you sound a little bit too anodyne or plain or generic in how you're describing something, which is kind of how things tend to come out with when you just take copy and pasted output from an LLM. Uh, you know, People might start thinking about that as AI output,
Mm.
even though, as we know, models are improving as far as how they generate stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of other things not to do, is you may have the idea and you may be tempted to ask it for a talk track and then read that talk track as your presentation. Please, for the love of God, don't do that. It is a great place, again, to get you started and spark your ideas and your creativity. And if you are one of the people, I know in one of the previous sections we talked about, you can go full script or not full script and
Right.
get as comfortable with it as you like. But if you're reading a script that an LLM has given you straight off the bat, that's not going to be an engaging talk. Again, something that we've previously mentioned is these presentations are an opportunity to bring your personality to it and engage with you as authentically you. So you can have the assistance from AI help you with the ideation, the content, whatever it is, but you've still got to bring your personality to that speaking engagement. And that's really where you will flourish, because people connect with people. And that's what community conferences at their core are really about, is connection and of course information sharing, but that connection piece can't be overlooked. So please bring your personality to your presentations.
Well, and I would imagine if I was reading from a script, I talked about in that episode how I find it challenging to kind of imbue a script with my own personality. But like we said, if that's what makes you feel comfortable on stage, you do that. But if you're reading something else's words, like not even someone else's, but like something else's words, I just imagine that that's going to be a lot harder to really bring your full self and like your personality to that script. Some people can do that with a script. They do it really, really well. But trying to do that with some words that are as you say, are not personal to you, I think would just be extra challenging to make that an engaging, interesting thing to listen to as an audience member. And whenever I've watched and critiqued and given feedback on someone's script, whether that was something that I saw at a conference and I was asked to give feedback, or if I was helping somebody prepare for a conference like the Dream Forces that we did, I tried to put on the head, tried to put on the mindset of what do I, as an audience member, need to feel and hear from this person so that I'm going to engage better with the content. And I find that would be such a challenging thing. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Peter, you actually have a little demonstration to
yeah,
prepared for us to talk
so
about this and realize some of this as well.
yeah, so I thought, and I'm doing this. Okay, so I need to share my screen, and we'll go with that entire screen. Okay, so and this is, I just wrote this article on Salesforce Ben. So okay, a little bit of self-promotion. This is the developer salary guide for 2025 that I wrote. This article that I wrote. Um, you know, just to kind of show what kind of feedback you can get from an LLM, because this is a bit chunkier and it's a lot more text. I thought, what I could do is go to Gemini and, what I've said is there's an article at this URL. Give me feedback on readability, structure, clarity, and specifically highlight the key points made by this article. So, this is really cool. This is the first time I tried this with Gemini, like point it at a web page and say, go tell me about this. And you can see that it's giving some details about that. And I find that there's kind of two different ways of treating an LLM if you're going to get feedback. One is to kind of treat it as the expert, which is kind of what I did here, right? I said, I'm going to trust you to be an expert on what makes a readable, clear article. Tell me about how this one is. And, it's pretty good. I also sort of did kind of the opposite, which is sort of like as a beginner, but I'll do a prompt that's just focused on that. Now, I think I should be able to do this as using the same article. Tell me what you, as a developer that doesn't know about this salary survey, might learn. Right. And so basically, like, I'm going to now get the LLM to take on the persona of someone who is not an expert, who doesn't know about this particular content, and see what the feedback is. And so there we go. So it kind of pulls out, I think, what were some of the key points that I wanted to make out of this particular piece. And you can do the same thing with an abstract. If what I imagine at some point is that you will be able to point like Gemini at a presentation and say, go write a script for it. But, let's face it, a lot of us, the text isn't in the images, it's in our head, right? It's what we know. And so I don't know if that's ever going to be a really useful way to generate a script, unless you're sort of like maybe recording yourself and having it go and like, get the video and extract it from there. But certainly, if you can think about how you could take data out of a longer abstract and pull out some bits that are particularly important. get the LLM to reorder how the abstract presents certain points about what your talk is. Have it give it suggestions for which pieces of information to include or to exclude. So, make multiple prompts, go in, get additional feedback, and then interpret that into your own take on the abstract.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing for for me about presentations is we talked about using images as the binder for the words that you're speaking and helping those words stick in people's minds by using images. One of those things, in addition to refining your talk track, like I've I wrote a I wrote a talk track for somebody that presented at an event this week, and it was about a topic that we were both well versed in, but wanted wanted me to handle it and give it some things. And the thing that I think you do benefit from, if you have a kind of script written out or the sections that you want to dive into using the car framework that you mentioned, was it the car framework?
CCAR, yeah.
CCAR, the car framework. If you have those points like written out, bullet pointed, you can ask some AI applications. So there's a couple out there. Gamma.app is one that is fairly well reviewed to create you slides based on what you're talking about. So if you have a full talk track, that's great. That'll do that for you. I believe that that's coming to Gemini baked into Word as well. So Google Docs to create a presentation. I think that's on their roadmap as well. So you can have a starting point with AI
Right,
as well.
yeah.
Like what images might resonate with this particular section of talk, or do I need more? The best talks, again, I find if you're able to use fast slides and fast images for bits of presentation that you're going for, like changing your slide midway through a sentence to resonate with something that you're about to say or have said, is really powerful. And I don't think that AI is going to be able to do that for you, because of the way that you might visualize in your mind what you want to talk about and how you want the images to flow, especially for humor and things, subtle nuances that AI just doesn't get.
Yeah.
Sarcasm, maybe, for example, something that you might use in your talks too. AI does have limitations in the human connection and the human conversation and communication that we have. So be mindful of that if that is an integral part of your personality. And it's okay that it's an integral part of your personality, but AI is not going to be the best tool for you in those instances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think things like tempo are considerations that I'll have when I'm giving a presentation. And uh, there's some principle that I was just hearing about this last week, that you can't really know an environment unless you can interact with that environment. And there's no way for that model to understand what it means to be standing up in front of an audience and actually presenting it. There's nothing that represents that in its training data. So in the end, like, if that doesn't come from you, it's just not going to be there. And understanding like where you need to go. Like, and you talked about fast slides, and I really think there are times to like slow down, and when you make a point, let it just hang and sit. And I think we talked about that too in
We
that
did.
in that one. So tempo, I think, is absolutely, it's a very human quality. It kind of goes back to some of like the compositional things that we brought up in the previous episodes. Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to get that from any generative AI today. Maybe someday in the future,
Maybe.
but not
Who
today.
knows? It's definitely not today. It's
Yeah.
definitely not right now.
So
Ask us again in 2027.
there we go. Yeah. So should we wrap up? I already brought up one of my don't do's, which is, don't copy and paste, but make sure to use AI as your partner and not your writer. The other one that I wanted to make sure that we talked about is, don't trust anything that your large language model or your agent asserts as truth. It may be true, but always check
Double
the
check.
sources. Yeah, absolutely make sure that you check the sources. And then I would also say don't ever hide that you use AI.
Mm.
Um,
It's okay.
it is okay, and you don't have to broadcast it either. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't necessarily have a detailed description of every bit of AI I use in the process of creating any content that I create. But I know how I use it, and I feel totally comfortable telling anybody that I do and defending how I do it. And I think if you're following these rules, you can be in that situation as well. You don't have to hide it, but just, outline how you've used it responsibly and how you now use it as a partner in creation. Everybody else is doing it.
They are. They are. Everybody's doing it. And it's one of those things that until you start using it more, you will know how much you like using it, where you might need to tweak it, and
Yeah.
what you're comfortable with using or without using. The It's one of those tools that I found myself, the more I've used it, the more I understand what kind of outputs it might give me, and how to get better results out of it. And I also know how to reframe things a lot better with my voice and actually tweak based on my understanding. And again, using it in the way that you showed us in that demonstration, Peter, to say what did you learn from this, just to make sure that you haven't omitted something. Like we are all very much can be very much experts in our field, but if you're giving a presentation to novices or beginners in a certain topic, it's so easy for you to overlook something. So ask it for what might I have overlooked based on these things. And again, check the sources about where they've come back with that information from, and see what foundational things you might have missed to help
100%.
your expert area stick.
100%.
Cool. Any more for any more, Peter?
No, I think that's it. I think we've said enough.
Perfect. Well, there you go, folks. A little bit of extra bonus content for you here. Hopefully that gives you some insight on where AI and AI isn't appropriate for public speaking, and hopefully you can use it to your advantage.
Excellent.